Hello friends, this is Caly. Thanks so much for joining me today for a feature using Concord 9th's Rainbow Stitches and Strings dies. You guys, these dies are so awesome and I love them so much. I love rainbow wrapped or string wrapped rainbows, and I have two handmade projects to share with you at the end of the video, so be sure to stick around. But for now, let's die cut some using some Concord 9th cardstock, and I've got these bands here that I've die cut the base bands out of, and then the faux string wrapped bands, and I've got them die cut from grapefruit, buttercup, and sea glass. Now I am just using the inks to add some color to the bands. Now, because these bands are thin, instead of ink blending them in circular motions, which will get ink almost all over the band, I am just using the sides. So I've applied pressure to the side of my brush and I'm just going back and forth instead of going in circular motions. That'll just make it a lot easier, and then you don't have to saturate the entire band with ink, and it just adds shading to the sides and on the insides of the bands as well. After I ink blended all of my bands with their coordinating colors, I've die cut two fringes for the ends of the rainbow here, and I am just ink blending with a little bit of wheat ink to give it a natural cord look. And when I'm done ink blending, I'll just go ahead and clean up and set everything aside. I've got the faux string wrapped rainbow bands that I die cut earlier, and I want to add texture to it. So I'm actually going to wrap these with string. I'm going to add some little strips of adhesive at the ends of the bands to hold my string in place. I've found embroidery floss that are in coordinating colors. I am obsessed with embroidery floss and have a ton of colors, and I love these soft colors. So what I've done is attach them to the bottom of the band so that I can wrap the string or embroidery floss all around the band. These die cut bands have mountains and valleys cut into them, so I am taking advantage of those and using them to hold my string in place. You want to make sure that you're pretty firm and holding the string pretty taut, but make sure not to make it too tight because we don't want to warp the shape of these rainbow bands. This first band is done, and I do wish I had gone all the way to the base with the embroidery floss, so I'm making sure to do that now with the yellow and the teal bands. Off camera, I did go back to the pink bands and added a strand of embroidery floss at the bottom of each of those bands to make it look more even and full. So we are again taking advantage of the mountains and valleys that are die cut into each of these bands to help hold our string in place. That'll finish my second band, and then finally the teal band. The teal band is actually the hardest band because at the top it's a little bit more narrow, so you'll get a lot more gathering of the embroidery floss towards the tip of that rainbow. So let's talk about string wrapped rainbows as I finish doing this. Have you done it before? I have used yarn, and I love using yarn because it's thicker, so that means less wrapping. So when you buy your yarn, be strategic about that. But basically what you do is you buy regular rope from a hardware store, any size you like depending on the size of rainbow and the thickness of the bands. I've done small ones and big ones that I'll share later, but what I do is I secure the end like I'm doing with these paper ones, and then I just wrap. You just keep wrapping until you get the length that you want, and then secure the end. And then once you have all of your colors, you can either secure your bands together, forming that rainbow shape using a hot glue gun or some thread. So back to my string wrapped paper bands here, I've added some foam strip pieces to the back of my bands. It's a little bit of work, but it also adds security to those bands and will provide a lot of dimension as well to your finished project. So the top of these fringes have a space, and I imagine it's intentional for adhesive. So I've added some score tape to it, and then I'm making sure to line up my bands using the grid marks on my mat. Okay, so now I'm going to remove the backing on all of these wrapped bands, and then I'm just going to line them up and adhere them over top of the bands that are already there. And that just creates so much dimension and texture, and you could really just leave it like this as a gift if you'd like. But I'm making a card today, and I really want to share the awesome sentiments that come with these coordinating dies. I know it looks like these foam strips are a little bit tedious, but you're going to have to add adhesive there anyway to adhere it to that backing for the rainbow. And I think liquid glue might make a bit of a mess, so I think the foam strips are the best option, and look at the dimension that it gives. There's so much texture to this, and I absolutely love it. So we have this coordinating stamp set. It's also called Rainbow Stitches and Strings, and it curves to the curvature of your rainbow. So I'm just going to stamp it simply on a cream cardstock using some First Eclair Nocturne ink. I bought this ink to try to use it for sentiment stamping, and I think it is just as great as the VersaFine Onyx Black ink if you already have that. Before I attach my rainbow, I'm just going to frilly up these fringes at the bottom of my rainbow here to give them a little bit more texture. And then we can go ahead and adhere this to a card base. I had trimmed down my panel before I attached my rainbow and stamped my sentiment, so it perfectly mats a card base here with a 1/4 inch border. I want to pull in the second card that I made without strings to show you the difference between the two. They are both equally beautiful, but that embroidery floss just gives it an extra oomph, don't you think? Alright, so now I want to share with you the handmade projects that I mentioned earlier in this video. I've got these rainbow wrapped projects here. I used nylon rope and then wrapped them with yarn, and I secured them by sewing the back together. It kind of leaves an invisible seam and you can't see it, which I love. You can also use hot glue, but I have not tried that yet. That wraps up my video for today. If you have any questions about my projects, be sure to leave a question in the comment section below or on my blog, and I will be sure to answer them for you. Thanks so much for stopping by today. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't already done so. I am going to link 2 more projects here for you if you're interested in watching more. Otherwise, have a wonderful day. Bye, everyone.